In this episode, I'll be making black raspberry tea. The method I use to make this tea can also be applied using red raspberry and blackberry plants. These berry teas are made using the leaves of the plant. I should mention at this point that although I will be talking about blackberries and red raspberries in this episode, all of the footage I show will be of black raspberries alone. Anyway, depending on where they are in the fruiting process, black raspberries can easily be mistaken for blackberries and even red raspberries. All three species of berry bushes have many things in common. They are all shrubs with thorns on their stalks, their leaves grow in groups of 3 or 5, and they produce aggregate berries. An aggregate berry is a fruit that contains many fruitlets which are joined together to make a larger fruit. As you can see, the surface of this berry is covered in many little mounds, which are otherwise known as fruitlets or drupelets. Although black raspberries, red raspberries, and blackberries have many things in common, here's how you can tell them apart. Red raspberries are the easiest to identify because they're red. It doesn't get any simpler than that. The other two mentioned species of berries are black, of course. However, the young fruits of the black raspberry and blackberry plants can sometimes be misidentified as red raspberries. Not that there is any danger in this mistake, since all three species are good to eat, but it's still good to know what species you're harvesting from. The young fruits of black raspberry and blackberry plants can sometimes be mistaken for red raspberries because they first turn red before they fully mature and turn black. If you pick a black raspberry when it is still red, it will taste bitter. Here's a black raspberry when it is just beginning to fruit. As it nears maturity, it will turn from green to light pink to red, and eventually black. You will know that a berry is ready to eat when it easily pulls away from the stem. If you gently tug on the berry and it does not separate, then you will know that it needs another day or two in order to fully ripen. Black raspberries and blackberries are the easiest to get confused. But here are 3 ways you can tell them apart. Number 1, the underside of a raspberry leaf is white, whereas a blackberry leaf isn't. Number 2, the thorns on the stalks of a black raspberry bush are quite small compared to blackberry thorns, which are twice the size. Speaking about thorns, red raspberry thorns are the smallest of the 3 species. They look like little hairs as opposed to an actual thorn. And the thorns of a red raspberry plant completely cover the stalks, whereas black raspberry and blackberry thorns have a lot of space between each other. Number 3, a raspberry, whether black or red, has a hollow inside its fruit where it has been picked from the stem. A blackberry, however, does not have a hollow. It might have a small divot, but it is solid. Now that we know how to properly identify a black raspberry bush, let's talk about making tea from it. Black raspberry tea is a healthy drink which has several medicinal purposes. It is used to relieve an upset stomach. It alleviates sore throats. Black raspberry tea also treats lung congestion caused by colds or the flu. It also helps stop diarrhea and menstrual cramping. It can also treat skin rashes by wetting a cloth with the tea and placing it on the affected area for 30 minutes at a time. Black raspberry leaves are high in minerals such as calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, and phosphorus. They are also rich in vitamins A, B, and C. The best leaves to pick for raspberry tea are the young top leaves of the bush. As well, the leaves taste best when they are picked before the bush fruits. I'm picking my leaves on this bush just as the berries are beginning to mature, and I found that they still had a good flavor. But it is after the bush has fruited that the leaves will begin to taste a little more bitter. Raspberry tea can be made from either fresh leaves, which is what I did here, or they can be made from dry leaves, which I will show you in just a moment. However, it should be noted that raspberry tea cannot be made from leaves that are only partially dried or wilted. That is because there is a change that takes place in the chemical compounds of the leaf as it dries. And for one reason or another, the in-between state of a partially dried leaf can make some people feel nauseous when tea from them is ingested. And so making tea from either fresh or fully dried leaves is the best way to avoid this problem. However, for the best flavor, the leaves need to be dried. I enjoyed my tea made from fresh leaves, but its flavor was quite mild, so I picked another batch of leaves to dry. I ended up making 3 blends of black raspberry tea, all of which I greatly enjoyed. I dried 1 batch of leaves in the oven at low heat. I fermented the second batch of leaves as I heard that fermented tea leaves have a richer flavor than plain dried leaves. To ferment the leaves, I started by gently crushing the leaves under a rolling pin. Then I wrapped them in a damp cloth and hung them to dry in a warm place for 3 days. I then took the fermented leaves and finished drying them out in the oven. I shredded both blends of black raspberry tea by hand and placed them in a cheesecloth to make a sort of tea bag. For my third blend of tea, I dried a few berries and added them in with some of my fermented leaves. I made all 3 teas at the same time to compare them against each other. First off, all 3 teas had a much stronger flavor than the earlier tea I made with fresh leaves. Although I did like the plain dried blend, my favorite was the fermented leaves as they truly did have the richest flavor. I also really enjoyed the fermented leaf and dried berry blend. The black raspberries added a bit of sweetness to the tea, and the flavor of the berries complemented the flavor of the fermented leaves. The best way that I can describe black raspberry tea is that it tastes quite similar to chamomile tea. All in all, if I had have known how tasty berry leaf tea is, I would have started drinking it a whole lot sooner. I definitely recommend giving it a try.